Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin, and today's video is an on my sewing table. And let me tell you, there's a lot on my sewing table, and I have a lot to say about it. So stay with me. I have a lot on my sewing table because I have a lot of whips. So lots of works in progress. And you guys have been asking about that K-facet blocks. Well, it's not blocks anymore. It's a quilt top. And I'm going to show you at the end. So I've been talking about the fact that I'm going to make a graduation quilt for my younger daughter. And it's September. Thankfully, we live in the South, so she will not need a quilt for months and months to come. One of the hiccups in this process has been the fabrics. And, you know, this child is my fabric store runner with me. She's my colorist. And she has been the beneficiary of we go to the quilt store and, you know, they have the impulse buy fat quarters right there at the register. So those of us that have no resistance are like, ooh, look at that. So sure enough, once we decided that she would get a graduation quilt and we had a loose plan for that quilt, every time there was an interesting navy or black fat quarter at the impulse buy counter, I would let her get one or two or four. And so we've just been collecting. And she loves space. And so we have a lot of navies that had constellations. She loves Halloween and bones and skeletons and bats and all that kind of stuff. And I think I talked about this on a former video. We were going to bridge from navy to black. But what we decided in the end was that it was going to be, I don't want to say too challenging, but honestly, it was going to be too challenging to do that in a way that was cohesive and really lovely and accomplish what she wanted. So we have relegated the navy fabrics to the back. So that will be, Lord knows, that will be a video about this quilt back, because now we've got to figure out how to do navies on the back. And thank you, by the way, to those of you who recommended the Moda Grunge as dark blender. Fantastic advice. I have two of those in this colorway. There are a couple of you who have sent me fabric, for which I'm very grateful and absolutely 100% planning on using in some capacity. But I got her home from college last weekend and chained her to the couch. Not really. I just said, we have to decide this. And so we sat down and she put it together. There's only one fabric that is a placeholder because she doesn't really like it. Everything else she likes. So I started making the blocks, and we decided on a 14-inch finished block, which is what Big Sister's blocks were. We have to have the It's not rivalry. It is rivalry. It's sibling rivalry. But anyway, their quilts are going to be the exact same size. So there's no, nya about that. And I just wanted to show you a few of them. While I'm here, I wanted to tell you, I have been referencing those solid fabrics that I got in a bundle as AGF solids, Art Gallery fabric solids. They are not. They are Ruby and BEE solids from Wyndham Fabrics. So all this time been misappropriating that. My apologies. The background, the white of the checkerboard, is this color called Wisp, and you can see it there. It's just that perfect, not quite white. I mean, on my table, it looks white. It's not really cream. It doesn't have a lot of yellow. It's just kind of that perfect mix. So we settled on Ruby and B solids from Wyndham Fabrics Wisp, which has now been ordered. This is the stack, gang, of in order. So we have row 1, row 2, row 3, which I often don't do. But I want to show you a few of these blocks. So this first one that I made, and I made it and went, ooh, and I hopefully glanced and seen it. It's a batik, but it's a multicolor with predominantly black. P.S. Paul is my husband and editor and sound engineer and cameraman and videographer and everything. And he said, "Oh, I just love that first block. It's almost like a batik." And I said, "It is a batik." So you guys are not the only ones listening to these videos. So that's the first one, and it made it and went, ooh. And then this is the second one. And maybe Paul will be able to crop in. I'm sorry, I'm doing the picking thing. It looks black from a distance, but if you look up close, it's actually black and like a charcoal brown pattern. And these are in order of the way they're going to go. So that's going to be next to that. And actually, now that I'm doing this, I'm realizing I'm going to run out of space. So I'm going to sit this on top of this over here. Here are the skulls that I will be honest, it's not my fave. And the colorist knows this is not my fave, but she loves it. So it's her quilt, not my quilt. For those of you that make quilts on commission or have done memory quilts, you will know that sometimes working with fabrics you didn't choose, we've actually talked about this over on Patreon. It's tough, but I do like the general direction we're going. So I think I may have the occasional, I don't love that much. Same with this one. You can see it's bats and moons. So that one will be next. Those go together. And this one, this was actually the fabric that started it all. I got this in a bundle, in a fat quarter bundle. It's a Rifle Paper Company fabric. And my daughter saw it and went, "Oh, I love that fabric," which I was surprised because I wouldn't say this is her style. She's a little more Wednesday Addams. It's a little happy and floral, but it really is a lovely fabric. So that first row, as you can see, it's going to have some color in it. It's got some, the first one has some muted. This is actually very bright. This one that's right here on the top, that's the last one in row one, and it has gold stars. So that's probably going to be the most colorful row. And this quilt will probably have the least number of shirts in it because she went with me to the fabric store, and you get a treat when you go with mom to the fabric store. So that's my progress on that so far. For those of you that were big advocates of the strip sewing, and I did a video where I'm like, I don't like it. These blocks are, they start off 4 inches, and then the finished little square is 3.5. It's just a 16-inch strip to start with. So I actually have strips on these. And I will say, I think I'm a little better with those shorter stretches of fabric. And so it works well for me as opposed to the long, skinny, and then you've got to be precise and then cut them and then turn them around. This is working so far. So maybe I'll get enough practice on my strip sewing with these blocks that I get good at it. And then maybe I'll have to redo that previous video. Next up is the Denim and Flower shirt, yokes, collars, and cuffs, and a Quilty Stars block. These blocks have been on this channel for so long, but it really is a long range quilt project. This is not one of those that I'm trying to fly through. I don't have a deadline on it. And the reason, well, a couple of reasons. It's not pressing because I live with this person and he's very patient, but I committed myself, as I'm wont to do, to only using shirt fabrics in these lighter pieces. I made that decision kind of early on, and I'm really trying to stick with it. I'm not using quilt store fabric. Now, the navy, I have bought yardage. And the reason is I started off with a navy shirt and realized lickety split that I was going to be buying navy shirts and they were not going to match each other. And so it's one thing to have scrappy on the inside. It's another thing to have scrappy on the outside. And that's just not the look I wanted. That is a look and can be really cool, but that was not the look I wanted. So I'm in the season of collecting. So I have started collecting interesting shirts. And this brings me to, so I do a Q&A, a monthly Q&A on Patreon. And ask for, do the call for questions, and then we choose them and I answer them. And one of the questions that has come up, and it has also come up here on the channel, which is why I'm going to address it here. Why do I love those denim and flower shirts so much? And I've answered it before, but I want to elaborate. The shirts themselves are great quality and good, solid. They're almost always 100% cotton. And so just the actual shirt fabric is great. But what will happen is I will open up that shirt and the yoke, the cuff, and the collar are these fun, like super fun, interesting floral patterns and prints, and it just fun. And so when I take my shirts apart, I save those, and I've been saving them for these blocks. And so this one is one that's predominantly yellow and blue. I've got some coming, and I want to show you that. Just this week, someone sent me a denim and flower shirt, and thank you for that, by the way, Donna. And this is the yoke that was in it. And you can see, this is a denim and flower shirt. This is a denim and flower shirt. There's some similarity, but they're not exactly the same. These are the cuffs. The first question was, why do you like denim and flower shirts so much? And then the sub question was, the pieces are so small. How can you possibly do anything with them? And the answer is, you have to have the right quilt pattern. And I call this the right quilt pattern. So I can get these triangular half square triangle. How about some redundancy? I can get these HSTs out of this yoke. See that? So I can get at least two. And if I play my cards right, sometimes I can get here and then again here, actually here. So if you can imagine that, and then there, and then here, and then here. So I can get 2 blocks, the equivalent of 2 blocks out of one yoke. The cuffs I can use for these little squares around that center square, even if they're interfaced. So for those of you that are looking and going, that's pretty solid, I kind of don't care. I'm just using it. And some of them I have pulled the interfacing off of it. I'll, take the time and pick. But a lot of times if it's not too thick, like really, really thick, then I just use it like this. And so this is a 2.5 inch block that cuts down to a 2 inch. I have pieced some of these little squares. Like if I am missing it by 1/2 inch, I'll split one of these down the middle and piece it and then cut my square. So that's the answer to this. I want to show you too. It's not just the florals, although that is super fun. And there's a lot of variety. So this one is kind of it's navy, but it's got a little gray in it. This is one that you've seen here before. It's a light blue. And I don't know if we'll be able to focus in, but it's little teeny tiny orange peels. And come on. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use a shirt with orange peels in a quilt. This one is just relatively plain, but has these fun polka dots on it. But here we go with the magic. Look at this. Y'all, look at that. That is crazy vibrant. And I saw that and was like, ooh, that will be great in my navy block. It's going to be busy. But I think with all of that navy around it, it will actually just look really great. So it's going to be cool. I'm declaring it. So this gray was fun. It's kind of a heathered. I've used this. My goodness, that actually reminds me of like a sailor shirt, but I probably won't put this as one of the half square triangles, I'll probably cut it down and use it. And I have done exactly that. I've got some of these in navy. That's another one. Actually, I think, yep, that's in this. Look at this. Look at this. These are 2 recent shirts that I broke down. I will probably use this in one of these blocks, because otherwise, if I do this with like this, it's going to be clashy. But this and this kind of are in the same color family. And so they'll be apart from each other like this, and it will be wild and super fun. This is another one of those florals that's navy, but it reads almost black. I've used it. And then I've just been rationing my use of this one. Here's one little tiny square of it because I like this paisley just so much. And then here's some more. Those are cuffs. Here's a cuff of that. So you can see, and then sometimes in the tag, it'll have this yoke like this. Oof, struggling. And then this will be sewn on, and then there'll be a little denim and flower tag. And so I even save these because guess what? Those are fun right there. Here's another one. I love that. If I had more of that fabric, I would use that in the graduation quilt, but I don't. So, and then if you're wondering, what do you do? Like, who saves the collar? Well, a lot of times in these shirts, this is what comes out of the collar. So this is a ribbon. I save these. I actually have a little tote that says ribbons, and I tie up, small gifts, or as if I'm giving small gifts. I do occasionally, but I'll tie them up. Same thing with these. If you press them open, and I have not pulled out all the strings. Look at that. That is a picker's dream right there. It's just surprising how you can use them. I saved one of these one time and then had a shirt like a month later that was the exact same. And so I actually stitched them together and made squares out of it. So you can actually piece the pieces, which is a little bit strange, but I sometimes do it. So if you're thinking to yourself, these are too small, you just have to broaden your use of what you can do with it. It may not go in a quilt, but it might be great for sewing together and making a koozie for your coffee cup. So that's that. So answering that question, not only for Patreon, but also for those of you that are watching going, what's the big deal about the Denim and Flower and Cactus Man? And there's one other one that I can't think of the name of it. All right. So that's that. Next up is the Magnolia Quilt. And I have a question for you all. So I'll be right back. So while I was getting the Magnolia Quilt out, I passed this shirt and thought, oh, I can show. So here is, this one is Porter and Ash. Maybe that was the name I couldn't think of. And you can see that tag with the little interesting piece. This one happens to be all the same fabric, but a lot of times they're different. So anyway, just wanted you to see that for yourself, how that works with the little square tag and the interesting yoke. So this is my Magnolia quilt. You guys have seen so much of this quilt. Probably all of you are like, oh, we get it. Okay, keep moving. This is the one that I did the confetti back on and got it all together. It's been quilt sandwiched. And when I decided to do that confetti back, I think that was on my sewing table. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check that out. I basically committed to quilting it myself because I did that confetti back and centered it on the back. And there are certainly long arm quilters that could manage it, but I don't happen to have any of those in my life currently. So here we are. I don't love the actual quilting part of quilting. I can do it. I'm not terrible at it. I'm not great at it. And this is for my friend that I love, love, love. And thank God, because she's one of the sweetest and most forgiving people I've ever met. So does not have to be perfect, which is great. So now I've gotten this far and I'm like, oh, shoot, I have to figure out how I want to quilt it. I have decided I don't want to free motion quilt it. It's kind of big. And as you know, wielding a large quilt through a not large sewing. I mean, I have an extended neck on my sewing machine, but it's still a trick. It's one thing to do loop-de-loops on a baby quilt. It's another thing to do loop-de-loops on a quilt that's almost bed size. So I've decided that that's not something I need to spend my time or energy doing because I will not be happy with it. So I'm committed to straight line quilting. And I was thinking through, I've done a couple of pillow cover. That's what I'm trying to say. So these were the practice blocks that we did, we being my friend Jennifer and I, to demonstrate the difference between perfectly precise cutting and piecing and then just kind of cutting plaids any sort of way. One of these I added a border to, but the blocks are the same. And I quilted them myself differently. And you can actually see the chalk line on this one. This particular pillow cover is just straight old crosshatch, just straight up the middle and then 2 inches over and then 2 inches over from that and so on and so forth. And I chose that 2 inches because once I had the finished piece, that was the width of the piece and down the middle. And I like it. Actually, I like it. It crinkled up nicely. It's not very dense quilting, but it's also not really wide open quilting. As I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm seeing how I'm not a great quilter. So I have some stitches that are just like 1 million stitches per half inch. And then I have some that are just like dot, dot, dot. So don't know what happened there. But anyway, so this would be one of the options for this actual whole quilt. And then I'm going to scoot this one over. This one, I did something totally different. I actually did it on the diagonal and I mirrored the lines of the kind of diamond petals, at least the big fat ones. So I, kind of went across the middle and then did what is a diamond or a square turned. And then that made a little diamond in the center. Whereas this one made a square. So do you see that? So this one made a diamond in the middle. This one is just like a plus sign. And I like them both. So I don't know. The benefit of doing the crosshatch is I don't really have to do chalk lines. I can just, do that line and then 2 inches over and 2 inches over and then turn the whole thing and do the same. This one I will really need to mark so I can stay on my line when I go in those places that it's basically stitching in the ditch for some of it, but not totally. And the last time I did the diagonal quilting, I totally lost steam and completely petered out on it and ended up pulling it all out and sending it to my friend Sissy, who quilted it for me. So that's a hesitation. I think if you can see these together, I want to show you if you feel discouraged about your piecing sometimes. When I made this block, I did it really quickly and I was not doing a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I just did a full on, maybe a little bit more than 1/4 inch seam allowance. And my friend Jennifer did the exact same block. And when we put them side by side, this one was significantly smaller. But I still loved the blocks so much that I decided to do the whole quilt of it. And that's great until you go to put that block in the bigger quilt. And you can imagine it did not fit because it was smaller than all of the rest of the blocks. So once I made the one too small, I course corrected and did work with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance from then on. So the rest of my blocks matched her block and we had this one odd man out and it didn't fit and it wasn't going to fit. And so I actually added, I don't know if you can, I hope you can see it because I really want you to feel with me, the frustration, but also I mean, things can be fixed. And I didn't want to take the whole block apart. I added one little strip right here. So I did a white, and then I added what should have been exactly the width right here. I kind of missed it just a smidge. So this is a rectangle where it should be a square. And that one is actually not totally square. If you look right here, this is a pretty good square. See how that's way above that? Let me reach up here. So it should be square like that. And can you see that? I'm sure you can see that. Same thing over here. It's a whole, I mean, it's really almost a half an inch off. That is so crazy. So if I do the crosshatch through the middle, when I get to this, first of all, it might hide that or it might accentuate it because the line is going to go right through here. If I follow the lines of those pieces, and it's just going to cut that off. Now, the question I have for you all and for myself is, will that mask that that's wonky, like way wonky? Or will that be like, oh, you don't even notice? If I do the diagonal, if you can imagine with me, it's going right on the line of that piecing. So it'll be great through the middle, probably, but it's going to clip that one that's a rectangle instead of a square. And I don't know. I haven't been doing it long enough to know. If I had not committed to doing it myself, I could send it to the long armor and do some swirly pattern, edge to edge quilting, and it probably would hide it. But that's not where we are. And so I don't know. So tell me what you think in the comments about that. I may have committed to it by the time I get the comments, but I really want to hear what you guys think, especially you guys that like the quilting part and have maybe been doing it for a while. I want to know what you think about it. And there will be some of you that will, don't do either of those, do this other thing, which I'm here for. So give me your thoughts. And I'm going to put this away and I want to show you the Kaffe Facet quilt top. Okay, so I've made my blocks and I've now turned it into a quilt top. We thought about putting it behind me on the design wall, but you wouldn't be able to see it and you definitely wouldn't be able to get any of the detail. So I made the square in a square. I used that log cabin method of construction. So I did, this border, then there, and I tried to orient them all the same way. I think I got it. I did change out this fabric right here. It was originally that one that had a little more orange and it had a black background and it just felt like it didn't belong. So I'll show you on the other end of this. This is about a third and a half of the quilt top. It will start, this will be the top, hang on, I can't do it, top left of the overall quilt top. So it's the true orientation of it is this way, with this being the top. But for the purposes of showing it on my sewing table, here we are. And I made some substitutions since the video that I made talking about it, and I want to show you those next. So this set of blocks, this combination, I made some changes and I wanted to highlight kind of the, again, challenging about Kaffe Facet, but also fun. I had in the center of this block the Aboriginal dots. And someone made a comment and I agreed and agree. It was too close, that the shirt fabric and the Kaffe fabric was actually so close that it read like a solid. There was not enough contrast. And I actually did that with two separate fabrics, which I will show you. And so reevaluated the fabrics that I had. I looked back at this one and the background of it is not exact. It's in the family, it's in the neighborhood of this one. And I felt like what it would bring to the party is this green and yellow gives it a lot of contrast. And that fabric, I think one of you actually was like, oh no, you got rid of my favorite fabric. Well, it's back. It made it in. It made it into the final thing. So I changed that out, liked it better immediately. Even though I loved the way that Aboriginal dots and this fabric came together, it's that thing. Sometimes you make a block and you go, I like this. But when there's a whole quilt with it in it, it needs enough contrast or it just would read like a solid. Similarly, these two blocks should be the same, but this orientation and this, rows of, it was like green turquoise, and you can see that on that fact border that I had, I used them and then there were no more of them. So I had to go on into the middle of the fabric, which left me with a different feel. So this one is purples and blue. This one is greens and blue. If I had a ton of this fabric, I would have done all of these the same so that each block on that diagonal would look like this. But on the upside, I mean, it is obviously the same fabric and they feel different, which gives it some movement and interest. So if you're like me and really like kind of uniformity and sameness, this is a little like when you see it, but because everything is so orderly, it does make it interesting. I did, cut the cabbages. I did fussy cut them. I didn't fussy cut anything else, but I did, well, this one a little bit, but this I fussy cut because I wanted there to be a flower there and not it just be random leaves. So that's this section. Now I'm going to fold it again so you can see some more of it. This purple fabric, I had the buttons with it. This is the other exchange that I made. And it did exactly what the Aboriginal dots. It was just too similar and ended up looking like just a big block of purple. And so I switched out with this wild turquoise and hot pink flowers. I did not fussy cut them. I just cut through that fat quarter and mixed it up. I think it's again an example of the approximation without it being exact matching. I think it works. This is what I had the original pairing. This is that same very first block in the green. And if I could get to it, look, they're right behind each other. That's so funny. So I actually used what's the very first block further down, and they feel completely different in the end result, which is one of those interesting things about when you put one color with a fabric and then a different color with that same fabric. They just have that's the nature of color theory and why it's so challenging, because it's what you put with it makes it feel different. And then the last row is this. I love this fabric. This is actually that one from the earlier bluey purple. This was I started to say loan, but I guess it's a gift from my friend Jennifer. We really worked to try to find that last color. It's a little bit warm compared to the rest of the cool blues and purples, but I do think it ties in nicely with that particular cut of fabric. So it kind of goes from that bright turquoise green all the way down to this warm mulberry, and kind of you get a little bit of everything in the meantime. So that's where it goes. And as I continue to work on it, you guys will get to see. Now, I was originally just going to make a quilt top and then here it is, but I can't do that. So now my mind is running about the backing. And so we'll see where that goes. But here's our progress for those of you that have been like, I can't wait to see. Here we are. I hope it's been as enjoyable for everybody else as it's been for me. It's really stretched me, and I've had to be willing to bail on some of my plans and do something different. And I think that's always good in creative pursuits, to go, that doesn't work, and make something different. So anyway, that's what's on my sewing table, and about 4 or 5 more other things, which we won't get into today. So that's what's on my sewing table. I hope you're making a lot of progress on your sewing table with your works in progress too. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thanks so much for watching.